Okay, good evening all. Thanks. Welcome to the first meeting of the Planning Committee for 2024. It's 25th of January, 4 p.m. A bit of housekeeping to start. May I remind everyone present, this is a hybrid meeting and it's being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet. And this recording will be archived for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand in person if they're sat in the chamber, or use the remote raise hand function located at the bottom left-hand side of the screen. This will put you in the speaker queue accordingly. When subsequently invited to address myself, then please press your activation button, which is the large one in the bottom centre of your screen. Please be patient and aware that there will be a small time lag. You do not need to press the button again. The response to the system is not instant. If the button or desk microphone changes to red, then it has responded. If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to address by myself, please could they turn the camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. When invited to address the committee by myself, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the attention of myself and or the Democratic officer, either Amy or Mark, as soon as possible. Once you have participated, I've lost my place. Once you've participated, please remember to turn your activation button off as not to delay other participants from coming onto the screen and to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and or grab the attention of myself or the Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has any difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, they should let myself or the Democratic Services Officer know. If a remote committee member has a prejudicial interest and is therefore required to withdraw from the meeting, the Democratic Services Officer will place the participant in the virtual waiting room until such time that the interest item has concluded. Please do not close your browser window whilst in the waiting room, as the Democratic Services Officer will bring you back into the meeting automatically when appropriate. For members attending the meeting in person, they'll be asked to leave the chamber for the duration of the interested item and will be invited back into the room as appropriate. If an electronic vote is called during the course of the meeting, then advice on how to participate will be given accordingly to committee members with voting rights at that time. If the Welsh language is spoken during the meeting, then simultaneous translation will be available to listen to. For meeting participants in the council chamber, a translation receiver and headset is available at each seat for your use at the appropriate time. For remote meeting participants, a language selection is available under the audio settings tab on the left-hand side of your screen for your use at the appropriate time. Pardon me. Translation will also be audible on the live stream for the meeting for any persons who are observing only. We have, I think, one registered speaker for this afternoon, so welcome and thank you for joining us. I will call you into the meeting at the appropriate time, and allocated speaking times will be strictly adhered to. So moving on then to the agenda, apologies for absence, if any.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Cowp and Councillor Payne.
Thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of November 2023. Can I ask someone to move these minutes?
I'm happy to move the minutes.
Thank you, Sandra. I'll second. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest and the nature of such interest under the Council's Code of Conduct, including whipping declarations. Councillor Gilligan.
Hi, I'd like to declare a personal and prejudicial interest on agenda number 13, item 2021/01710/FUL, former Methodist Church, Dinas Powys. It's a family member, close family member, and I will withdraw from the meeting while this item is being discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Sandra?
Agenda item, or plan application 2023 00087 full. It is a development of social housing by Neworth, who are a partner for Vale Council for affordable housing. I don't think it's a Reg 3 development, so I think I am allowed to speak and vote on this, but just as cabinet member for social housing and tenancy engagement to register that, please.
Thank you, Sandra. Councillor Buckley? You're muted, Ian.
Sorry, I pressed the big button, not that one. Agenda item 2023/00821/FUL. I have looked at this one previously with Penarth Town Council, but we'll look at it with fresh eyes and non-prejudiced. And agenda item 13/021/01710/FUL. I declare a personal but not prejudicial interest in that one, so I believe I can still stay in the meeting.
Yeah, can you just clarify the nature of your personal interest, please, Ian?
I know the people, but it accounts for half of Penarth, doesn't it?
Okay. I see no other hands up. Ian, can you put your hand down? We move on to agenda item 4, unless which is site inspections. Who's taking this through? The site inspections are on the agenda, which ones that took place on the 30th of November. They should have been reported to the meeting that didn't occur during December. These are for noting. So I move that we note.
Happy to second.
I assume there's no dissent. I see no hands. Fine, thank you. Agenda item 5 then, the guide to public speaking at planning committee review. You've had the papers on this. Amy, if you can take us through it, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, committee. You obviously have had the report in advance, so I'm not going to go into great detail within the report. The committee is also aware and experienced of having updates with regards to the guide being presented to committee in the past. This report has been brought before you to advise you of a review that's been undertaken and proposed updates to the public speaking guide, which is available to promote the public speaking function at your committee. The review, as part of the review, a consultation was undertaken with officers and the chair of the committee and outlined above, together with consideration given to comments received as results of feedback from public speakers. The following implementation of the Council's updated multi-location meetings policy that was agreed on Cabinet on the 7th of September 2023 is the main catalyst for providing the update for you today. So the recommendations before you are to ask for the committee's endorsement of the updated guide and to refer said guide to full council for final determination, subject to any amendments that you may have. and that the arrangements for public speaking at your planning committee be reviewed regularly on a biannual basis. And I think I'll leave that there. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Amy. I mean, this is for our notification and consideration prior to it going to full council eventually. If anybody has any comments, any questions, any queries, or can we accept this? I see no hands. I see no comments. I move the recommendations then, both recommendations, which are to ensure the views of the planning committee are taken into account prior to the final approval of the guide, and to monitor the effectiveness of the arrangements. What will happen is that the guide in full, after it's been through the various scrutiny processes, a full guide will be sent out for our consideration and comment. Thank you.
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. That's no dissent. Next one then is similarly public speaking of public rights of way subcommittee meetings. Amy.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the similar as to the public speaking guide for your committee, Chair, this one is referring to the subcommittee of the Planning Committee, the Public Rights of Way. It's fair to say this has been longer between reviews in terms of this guide, and the review has been undertaken based on the same premise of the multi-location meetings policy that was agreed by Cabinet on the 7th of September 2023. Obviously, this guide will only be in use and relevant when there are meetings of the subcommittee, not your full committee, as per this evening. So the recommendations mirror the first report in that it's asking the committee to review, endorse the attached guide that you can see at Appendix A, and then that will be referred to full council for final determination, including any recommended amendments that the committee has. And that the second recommendation is that the arrangements for this guide be reviewed regularly on a biannual basis also. Thank you.
So same as the last one, are there any comments or any dissent? In that case, I move the recommendations as is.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. I see no dissent, I see no hands up. Moving on. Agenda item 7, the Audit Wales recommendation regarding governance and planning service. Ian Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. If it's okay, I'll share my screen to share the report. Bear with me a moment, it's just a bit of a lag on this. Here we go. Okay, so this report relates to the review that Audit Wales carried out with us last year. It was a review of governance arrangements in the planning department, and it involved reviews of documents and processes we already have, and then a number of interviews with, there was quite a lot of people I think were interviewed. There was Marcus Goldsworthy as director, myself, Liam Jones as operational manager, all the team leaders, some senior planners, I think the whole policy team, Councillor Thomas as chair of committee, Councillor Sivanyanam as cabinet member, and some other members of planning committee. And I think James Doherty is our planning lawyer as well, to get a feel for existing governance arrangements and any areas where that could be improved. So the purpose of this report is just to set out the planning committee the findings and to set out the recommendations. And in addition to that, the kind of process of political reporting that these recommendations will go through, ultimately leading hopefully to delivery of actions to respond to the recommendations from Audit Wales. So I'll just go through kind of relatively briefly what the recommendations are, what those things might comprise. What we've got here is just a report to set out the kind of the principles of what's being recommended. The proposal is that once this has been through planning committee and the other committees prior to full council, at the point that it would go to cabinet, it would then contain a draft of the various things that are suggested to respond to the recommendations, and that draft then would then be considered at full council. But yeah, just in summary, the review was generally positive. The key finding was that the planning service has a positive working culture and effectively supports the council to deliver its wellbeing objectives, but there were some gaps in governance arrangements which could be tightened. The main recommendations from that were that we agree a terms of reference for planning committee that clearly states the purpose, role and responsibilities, a plain language planning protocol to be included in the constitution and on the council's webpage, to undertake a review of the scheme of delegation, and there was one specific recommendation about the scheme of delegation, about applications submitted by officers, and also for the council's planning service to present its performance measures and targets in the service plan. So that's there at the front end in the exact summary. The recommendations on the report are for planning committee to consider the findings arising from the review and consider the proposed response to those recommendations, which I'll come to in a bit more detail in a moment. And then subject to that, then that we refer the report to E&R Scrutiny Committee, thereafter to Governance and Audit, and then a separate report to Cabinet for their oversight and potentially their endorsement prior to being reported to full council. So just to go into a little bit of detail on the kind of the recommendations. So the first one, a terms of reference, that's something which Audit Wales have told us most councils and planning departments have. It's doesn't necessarily have to be that long and complicated. It's typically a definition of what the planning committee is, its remit and function, and that can be both generally and it could be potentially a bit more detailed and prescriptive and make reference to some of the specifics of the scheme of delegation in terms of the functions and the types of applications. It can list the powers exercised by committee, in what areas of the council services, the composition of the committee and how that's agreed. So it should be comprehensive on those points, but avoid unnecessary repetition of other documents because there's potentially some overlap with the planning protocol and the scheme of delegation. So that's the first recommendation. The second one relates to a planning protocol. So you'll note in the report at paragraph 2.11, there's just a list of the things that could potentially be included in the planning protocol. So those could be elected member involvement in pre-application advice, personal, prejudicial and pecuniary interests, predetermination, predisposition and bias, lobbying of members, site visits, office member relations, etc. I mean, some of these things here, like site visits, we obviously have quite comprehensive notes on, and I would suggest, it would be reasonable for those to be incorporated into the protocol. The purpose of this is to give, officers, members, stakeholders, members of the public, kind of confidence in the system, to make sure that there's transparency to how we make decisions, to make sure that decisions are robust and consistent in terms of decision making, notwithstanding each one being on its merits. It's all about the structure for making decisions being clear. And I think, in principle, my view is this is something which should really help members and officers. I think in particular things like lobbying of members and also lobbying of senior management, a protocol that's clear as to what we should all do in circumstances where members or officers are contacted by whether it be an applicant or an objector, so that then anybody engaging in the system knows that they're being treated fairly and consistently. So I think that will help officers and members defend how we direct queries, how we process those inquiries. I think for members, it's probably common that you might be approached by people on both sides of the argument, might be the applicant, might be objectors, and I think hopefully this will be really useful for everyone in kind of structuring how we deal with that kind of contact. before my time in my most recent roles, I believe there have been proposals in the past for a planning protocol, which for one reason or another didn't get adopted by full council. But hopefully through the process of reporting, tonight and the subsequent committees I referred to, we can get to an agreed position where we have a structure, a protocol that we kind of all feel will improve governance around the planning service. And then just coming to scheme of delegation. So I mentioned earlier there was one specific recommendation that Audit Wales mentioned in respect of planning officers as opposed to just chief officers and members. And secondly, even though this wasn't kind of explicit in their report, which is appended here, I can advise from my discussions with the members of Audit Wales that they felt there would be some benefit if the kind of the emphasis of our scheme of delegation was inverted. So at the moment, the scheme of delegation sets out what can be dealt with under delegated powers. So it's the inference being that anything outside of that goes to committee, whereas they felt it would be clearer if there was explicitly a list of what goes to committee. So we can consider the merit of that. It's also an opportunity to consider whether there are some types of strategic or important developments which aren't seen by committee currently. So just an example of that might be, I think the way the scheme of delegation is structured, potentially a major application for an employment site might not necessarily need to be seen by committee when considered against the scheme of delegation, because the scheme refers to allocated sites or existing employment areas. So that's just an example of a kind of development that members may feel there's merit in coming. So, any discussion at this or subsequent committees on that point would be welcome. Appended to this report is the audit report in full, which sets out the recommendations and the reasoning for them. I would just point out that at the end, Appendix B or C, it's the last one, it's the response form that we sent back to Audit Wales to indicate how we intended to respond to the recommendations. Obviously, it's caveated to some degree because it's subject to the report going through the processes I've described tonight. Just to flag that the dates that are here are wrong now because of cancellations of planning committees, but the kind of the spacing and the order of committees would still be as set out there. So hopefully that sets out the main points. That's all I kind of would intend to say in setting the scene. I've stopped sharing now. So happy to answer any questions or for members just to make any comments they have on that report.
So I'm right in concluding then that this is going through the various processes. It will eventually come back to us for final ratification.
The process set out is that it would go to scrutiny, then governance and audit, and then cabinet, and then full council. So after full council, I would imagine it could come back to planning committee for information and noting, but it will have been through a vote at council on the specific content of those items that I've kind of set out earlier.
Okay, thank you. So we already have a terms of reference written document, but this will be a variation on that. Are there any comments or questions then from members of the committee? Councillor Ernest, you have your hand up.
Councillor Ernest, you're on screen. We can't hear you at the moment. Is your microphone on?
No.
I'm afraid we're not hearing you, Councillor Ernest. Are you able to disconnect your headphones for us? If you could rejoin. If you exit the meeting and disconnect your headset and then rejoin for us. We can see your headset's gone. Would you mind just disconnecting from the meeting and re-click your joining link, please? If you don't mind waiting 1 moment, Chair.
No, we'll wait for you, Anthony. You know,
Hello, Anthony. Can we hear you now?
I don't know.
Yes, we can. Yes.
You can. Okay, right. Sorry about that, everybody. The magic wonders of computers. Yeah, my only question really to Ian is obviously, Ian, I had a gap from sitting on the council for several years, and having come back, I've found that, of course, a very much larger number of decisions are now officer decisions under the scheme of delegation. And I'm just wondering whether there was any query by audit as to the level of decisions that are officer led, as distinct from some of those quite important ones, I feel, that really ought to, in my view, come before committee. Was there any comment on that, or was that alluded to by members or indeed the Audit Commission? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, in my own interview with them, there was discussion on that point. They were keen to ensure that what they, I think, would describe as strategically important and corporately important applications come to planning committee. Even I touched earlier on employment sites, and actually, as major applications go, potentially a large employment application can be one of the relatively less controversial ones, particularly where it's maybe a lot of floor space, so it's a major, but actually there might not be a lot going on in terms of traffic movements, and if it's in the middle of an industrial estate, even if it's a big building, you know, it might not be that prominent. So it's a kind of major application which actually is potentially relatively uncontroversial. They still felt that even something like that was quite important because of what it means for the council delivering on employment space. So they were keen to ensure that strategically important applications were seen by committee. But in my interview, there was probably even more emphasis on making sure that committee's time is taken up with the strategically important applications and not applications which they really needn't be seeing, and that goes to kind of what they see as being value for money in delivering the service. So they're very keen to ensure that, you know, particularly in the current climate, that that councils are operating in an efficient way, and that councils aren't and committees aren't having to take up their time with things which are really outside the scope of what, and this is, you know, will be laid out in a terms of reference or planning protocol, outside of the scope of what planning committee is designed to be there for. So difficult to say whether that means that things you believe should be at committee, they don't. I mean, without specific examples, it'd be hard to say. But I think for me, the key point was that they wanted committees to be efficient in what they were looking at. So they weren't advocates for longer agendas with more items. My read of it, that it was, if anything, probably more the other way. But obviously it's about striking a balance, and things aren't necessarily important only because they're big. We know that, and things can be really locally important even if they're fairly small in scale. But yeah, so just to answer your question, yes, there was discussion on it, but it really was about getting that balance and making sure that committees are kind of efficient in their workload.
Thank you, Ian. I can confirm that in my discussion with them as well, they seem to be angling towards more slimmer agendas, and that we should be seeing less non-strategic, less use of committee time with agenda items that they thought maybe could be dealt with under delegation. I have Councillor Cave's hand up next, and then Councillor Ernest, you have your hand up again. So Councillor Cave. Christine, can you press your button, the centre button?
Hello. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Hello?
go ahead, Christine, we can.
Thank you. Okay, brilliant. Yeah, I was part of the audit committee's scoping project to in order for them to be able to write this report. They spoke to several members, including myself and obviously you as the chair, and Ian and so forth. And that really wasn't my take on it. And I really feel that if we were to make our agendas any slimmer, we would be perhaps surplus to requirements, because I think often our agendas are very slim and sometimes they're non-existent when meetings are cancelled because there's no business. So I think we should really have some additional process to this just being brought to this committee this evening. I think we as members of the committee should have some oversight in what is actually being bought and not bought, which at the moment, the delegated powers seem to be vast, and the audit committee seem to be saying that we run the risk on occasions of not bringing items that we should bring. And so I do think there should be an additional step here somewhere where we as the committee have some input and some greater understanding of what is and isn't going to be bought going forward.
Thank you, Christine. I would remind you we've got the call-in process, which is another step in the process of bringing stuff to the committee.
But I do think, Chair, just to come back to you on that point you've just made, I do think one of the things that's being suggested here is that under the protocol, perhaps the call-in process would be reduced. I may have misunderstood that, but that's what I thought was being suggested. I hope it isn't.
That's not my understanding of it, but I'll ask Ian to comment if possible, please.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, my discussions with them weren't specifically about call-in. It was about getting the scheme delegation right to make sure that the right kind of applications are coming to committee. I mean, the two things go hand in hand, really. I think, all of our interviews with Audit Wales probably went off in slightly different directions based on the nature of the conversation. So we all may have slightly different experiences of what they sort of focused on with us. I think the key thing is in paragraph 18 of their report, it says the planning service has an action within the Sustainable Development Action Plan to review the scheme of delegation to ensure that planning committee is focused on the most strategic issues. This action could lead to greater clarity on who determines those. I think that's the key that comes out of the report is the most strategic issues. Call-in is always going to remain an important thing, but I guess we just, as context, we all need to bear in mind that in planning, so much of what we do is locally important, is controversial locally potentially, and is of interest to a number of people. That in itself doesn't necessarily equate to strategically important, and it's about getting that balance between strategic importance, the role of committee, and locally important. Members of course are entitled to call applications in, and there's a procedure there for that to be considered by myself and the chair, and that remains. And Audit Wales didn't suggest that we should be specifically limiting or changing the call-in procedure, but that we should be making those decisions on call-ins, and that's for members making the decision if to call in, and for the chair and myself to consider the merit of it. We should be doing that in the context of considering what is the role of planning committee and the nature of apps that they should be considering.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Ernest, you have your hand up again. You wanted to come back on in previous question.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm just a bit concerned that the Audit Commission are concerned that we should be efficient in our management, if you like, of planning applications. As most members know, it's rare now that we get more than 4 or 5 items on a planning agenda. We lost the planning committee at Christmas time. We lost another one back sometime in the summer, I recall. So that means we've only had, 10 planning meetings during the year out of the many hundreds of applications that are going through the system. And I hear what Ian says about, for example, large industrial sites employing, for example, many hundreds of workers. It's a very valid point, but there are implications for other committees, areas of interest. For example, environment and regeneration. If a major application is approved, we'll say, let's say in Barry, there could well be implications then in terms of highways, in terms of access by train, car, whatever, active travel and so on. So it's easy enough to say in planning terms that application either meets criteria or doesn't. But when you look at it from the point of view of other committees of the council, and more specific committees in some cases, I think there is a case for a wider dissemination of the requirements as a result of that planning application. I'll say no more than that, Chairman, but I think the point is made. Thank you very much.
As Ian has said already, that this is going to several other committees and Cabinet and back to full council before any conclusion, and there will be opportunities for those scrutiny committees to consider their positions in terms of the new process. Councillor Wilson, you have your hand up now.
Thank you very much, Chair. And very interesting hearing the debate about calling in applications. Of course, any member can call an application. But as you know, we've got to be mindful of that process. It's not something that we should easily do. I think sometimes in the past, some members think automatically if things they got a small concern over, it should go automatically to committee. No, we should really think about the long-term consequences of that decision, because if we take it to committee, the committee votes it down, it goes to appeal. Appeal says basically there's no case, really, it should have automatically passed before. Then we could potentially lose lots of money on appeal of all fees against the council, and the council doesn't look too good, to be quite honest. So we've always got to bear in mind that the role of the planning committee is obviously to look at major applications where there is, not a hard and fast rule as to whether something will succeed or not in terms of planning reasons. But I would also like to emphasise the word quasi-judicial committee. It is not just a standing committee, it's got a particular legal purpose. We've got to bear in mind that, and I think every planning member should be, and hopefully is aware of that important function that we all have. I'm not going to say any more.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Perks, you wanted to say something?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that, the planning committee, obviously we have to make decisions on planning law, that we, look at the applications in front of us and make those decisions on what the planning law actually says, which the officers advise us on. So those are the reasons that we're here, is to make those decisions about that. So that's all I want to say, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Any other members of the committee have any comments they would like to make? Ian, would you like to sum up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if obviously if any member has any comments or thoughts they want to make, after tonight, having considered it even further, please feel free to let me know, ring me or email me, and I'll make sure that that's all then taken into account. As we sort of develop this heading towards Cabinet and full council, doesn't need to be limited to thoughts that have been made known within the reporting cycle. It can be done at any time, so feel free to get in touch and we can have a chat about it.
Thank you, Ian. I'm just trying to get back to my my recommendations. Right, the recommendations, there are two recommendations here. The Planning Committee considers the findings arising from the review of the Planning Services Governance Arrangements Audit Wales recommendations and the proposed response to those recommendations, comprising the adoption of a planning protocol on terms of reference, amending the scheme of delegation, including to make explicit reference to excluding planning-related related officers' own applications from delegated powers, and providing more explicit performance measures in future service plans. And the second recommendation is that Subject to recommendation 1, the report be referred to Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee, thereafter to Governance and Audit Committee, and thereafter a separate report to Cabinet for their oversight and endorsement prior to being reported to full Council. It's proposed that the terms of reference, planning protocol and any specific changes to the scheme of delegation be provided to Cabinet and then full Council. And I move those minutes. Those recommendations, sorry.
I'll second those recommendations, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Any dissent? Any further comment? No. In that case, I take those recommendations are accepted with no dissent. Thank you. Right. Moving on, agenda item 8, building regulation applications and other building control matters determined by the Head of Sustainable Development under delegated powers. These are, of course, for these are for your notice. Again, I see no dissent, so I take that as accepted. Agenda item 9, planning application.
Sorry, Chair, just to confirm, are you moving with note for that?
I move we note. Need a second.
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, quite right, Amy. Agenda item 9, planning applications determined by the Head of Sustainable Development under delegated powers. Again, this is for noting, and I move we note.
Happy to second, Chair.
See no dissent. Right, we come on to agenda item 10, which is appeals. I believe, Liam, you're taking us through this.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll just share my screen, so just wait for that to load now.
Thank you, Liam. We're just waiting for your request to come through. Can I just ask Ian Robinson to stop his previous share request, please? Thank you. We've now got your request, Liam. That's coming through now. It's waiting for source.
Okay.
That's now on screen for you, Liam.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of appeals, you'll see the report before you. We've got a few new appeals that have been received on pages 31 and 32 of your report. So these are down for consideration at the written representation route. So I won't go into those ones now, but they're just for information.
Sorry, Liam. Liam, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt. We're having a bit of sticking on your audio. Is there any chance that you could turn your background off or briefly disconnect and rejoin for me?
Yeah, that's no problem.
Thank you, Chair. We'll just wait for Liam to rejoin us, if you don't mind, just so we can get that audio nice and clear.
Yeah, that's fine. Although it seemed to clear up right at the very end there. I don't know what happened.
Hi, Liam. We can't hear you at the moment. No, we can see you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Is there any? Is it possible to take your background off for me? Because that can take up a little bit of bandwidth.
I think I'll have to leave again.
If
It seems to have improved.
Thank you very much for your patience, everybody. Just bear with us one moment. And we can see that Liam is still connected. If you could come on screen when your background is off, please.
Yeah, I'm back.
Yes,
Can you
lovely.
now-
Yes, we can hear you and see you loud and clear. If you'd we can see your screen share requests, so we're waiting for source.
There you go. Can you hear me now?
We can see that now, Liam.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'll just make a start. So yeah, what I was just going to share with you is one of the enforcement appeal decisions we've had. So it's set out in your report, so I won't go through the full extent of it, but just to flag it was, it relates to land at Sefton Quarry in Penmark. Just an overview there, the location of the site north of the B4265, not too far from Cardiff Airport, actually to the southeast of the shop there. It's referred to as Sefton Quarry, but there's been no extraction or quarrying activity taking place for some decades, but the site's understood to be used for a mix of uses, things like waste, scrapyard uses back in the 80s to early 90s. So there wasn't any meaningful activity on site until around about 2021 when a complaint was made. That complaint related to some levelling at the site, levelling works, and some shipping containers were placed on the land. An allegation there about storage use without planning consent. So officers investigated that use. These images really just give an overview flavour of what the condition of the land was like. So in terms of storage of shipping containers and then storage of various sort of waste materials and miscellaneous items. The result of that investigation at the time was that the landowner submitted a planning application seeking a change of use of the land. That was reported to the planning committee back in September 2022. Officers then recommended refusal and also recommended an enforcement notice be issued. So the key reasons for issuing a notice of refusing planning consent related to the site being in an unsustainable rural location, so not very good in terms of access and transportation there, particularly for what was being proposed as a sort of waste management site, the harmful impact on the character of the countryside, and then a lack of ecological information. So following that committee resolution to issue a notice, and this was then served in January 2023, alleging that material change of use and seeking that the shipping containers and other items on the land be removed and the land be restored to its former condition. So the time scale set out on that notice was 4 months to comply. So an appeal came in, and as you're aware, when an appeal comes in, that notice is held in abeyance until we have a decision. So decisions now come through in December, just gone, and then the inspector has upheld the notice. The only variation, as set out in the report there, is that inspectors allowed a period of 6 months to comply with the notice as opposed to 4 months. So just a little bit of extra time, really. So, as I say, I won't go through the full detail, but the key issues were that the appellant argued that the site was lawful. The inspector looked at the evidence and considered it wasn't lawful, particularly that because the storage use hadn't occurred for a sort of continuous period to generate an immunity period. The use was quite intermittent. There were other arguments put forward in terms of the planning merits and why the council should allow the scheme, but the inspector sided with the council, saying it is an unsustainable location. It does conflict with the rural character of the area. He didn't feel that a scheme of landscaping or vegetation around the site would really mitigate the landscape or amenity impact arising. So yeah, a good decision in the round. So that's that one. And then also on your report, there's reference made to Holiday Inn. A few committees ago, we sought emergency action through agreement with the chair to issue a temporary stop notice and an enforcement notice. Largely, it was due to the fact that solar panels had been erected on the building, and we haven't had details, particularly a glare and glint report to assess whether they were acceptable. Since that time, the applicant has put an application in, and we've approved that application. So there's no further action to take place on that appeal. That's it for that, then, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. It was a bit garbled, but I think we got the gist of it and heard most of it. Can you turn your request to speak and stuff off now because it's interfering with the feed. Thank you. That report there then is for noting, and I move we note unless anybody has any comment. I see no comments.
Happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any dissent? I see no dissent. So moving on to trees, which again is for noting, agenda item 11. Again, it's for noting, and I move we note.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Perks, no dissent, no comments. In that case, moving on. Enforcement, agenda item 12. We've got items here, and I think Sarah Feist, you're taking us through this.
Hi, Sarah. I'm afraid you're muted at the moment. Is the mute button next to your... no, I'm afraid not. No, I can see you're speaking to us. Is there... You haven't got the microphone muted next to the activation button at all? No? Would you be able to remove your headset to see if that improves it? Could you unplug the headset for us? No, we were just wondering if you could unplug the headset at all for us, Sarah, and then disconnect and rejoin for us. Thank you, Chair. Bear with us one moment. Hello, Sarah. We can see that you left and rejoined. Are you able to come onto screen for us? No, I'm sorry. We still haven't got your audio, Sarah. Are you able to, when you exit the meeting, please, and when you rejoin, unplug your headset, then rejoin, and then check your settings for me, please? Yeah.
Well, while we're waiting, I see Steve Butler, you've got your hand up.
Yes, Chairman, I was going to suggest the same thing, that Sarah just goes into settings and maybe changes the microphone option. That might well work. It worked for me.
I see she's back on. Can we hear you, Sarah? Can you try speaking?
Ask her if she can speak to us.
Sarah, can you try speaking? Can you hear us? She can't hear us either now. Sarah, can you hear us now? Sarah?
Do you want to move on to the first application, Chair, and we'll try and support there and come back?
We'll move on to the next, onto the applications and come back to Sarah when Democratic Services try to help. So moving on to the applications. On the applications, we have 3 on the agenda, but I can tell you that item 2023-00895/full, Great House Farm, Penllyn. We're asked to defer this item as the applicant's agent has informed the planning department that the incorrect certificate has been submitted and a new correct ownership certificate, certificate B, is needed. This automatically involves a 21-day waiting period after submission, so hopefully it can come to either the February or March committee. So
Second.
I move we defer.
Happy to second, Chair.
Any dissent? Deferring the Pentland. Right. On the other items, we do have some late reps, which you will have all had the chance to see. We also have a speaker. I believe he still wants to speak. Mr. Hurley, is it
That's on cross. That's on the Crossway item, Chair, for Mr. Hurley. But can I just confirm, we're just going to put Councillor Gilligan, who has an interest in this item. We'll just make sure that she's in the waiting rooms.
Yeah.
Bear with me one moment.
Yeah, if you can ask.
Okay, Chair, just to confirm that Councillor Gilligan has exited the meeting.
Thank you very much. Right. I think this report is 2021/01710/full, former Eastbrook Methodist Chapel, Chapel Row, Eastbrook, Tinnis Powys. And Stephen, I think you're presenting on this.
I'm indeed, Chairman, that's correct. I don't know whether Liam wants to just show the images. So members will recall back in 23rd of November 2022, the application was reported to Planning Committee with a resolution to approve planning permission and also to secure a financial contribution in the sum of £27,631.20 for an off-site affordable housing contribution. There was, following committee, there was some initial progress on the Section 106. However, in May of 2023, the agent advised that they had reviewed their cost budget and then engaged a surveyor property consultant to review the costings. So the outcome of that was, as a result of the assessment, the applicant has requested, on the basis of the information that's been submitted, that he wishes to challenge the requirement for the specified sum. So page 93 of your report sets out the information that's been submitted in terms of viability. So just briefly in terms of policy and guidance, policy MD4 does, in supporting text, does state that where a developer contends that Section 106 requirements are too onerous and will potentially make a scheme unviable, they will be expected to submit a breakdown of the development costs and anticipated costs based on properly sourced evidence. So we've had a quite detailed viability report prepared by CTD Consults, in addition to a cost plan prepared by Curtin Chartered Surveyors, a valuation report prepared by Linnells, and a viability appraisal checklist. So in summary, we've got sort of key elements to look at. One is the open market sales income, and that's been done with kind of two separate reports, really. One looking at sales values in Dinas Powys, looks at the latest sales value in Dinas Powys with a range of between 435 and 540. There's also another report that looks at the number of sales within a quarter of a mile of the site within the last 2 years. So essentially, they've come up with the value of £400,000, which we are satisfied is generally representative of the value of that property, noting that even though it's a 4-bedroom property, it is a smaller 4-bedroom property, perhaps not comparable with the older style 4-bedroom properties with much larger gardens, of which, of course, two of these properties, two of the bedrooms are on the ground floor, which obviously further potentially impacts on the value of the property compared to traditional 4-bedroom properties. We also look at the gross development costs and the cost of building. These have been based on the latest costs that have been provided, and they've used the median quartile in terms of the level and quality of build, which we're satisfied based on the cost per square metre. Obviously, in addition to that, there are fees to add on top of that. There's finance. So in conclusion, the construction costs and the fees, together with the land purchase costs at 80,000, total sum 445,000. obviously that's £45,000 in excess of the estimated value of the finished property. So that figure itself doesn't include any developer's profit. So the developer's profit we consider would be between 15 and 20%. So so obviously looking at the figures, it's quite surprising that the development wouldn't be making any profit, and there'd be 45,000 difference. So factoring in the affordable housing contribution of 27,000 in addition to that would make the scheme even more unviable. Just as a point of clarification for members, on page 96, for some reason there's been a kind of formatting error where the old recommendation has pulled through. So obviously the whole report is suggesting that there's Section 106 wouldn't be payable. So the text between the word recommendation and condition 1 shouldn't be there. So the recommendation is not to secure a Section 106 financial contribution. It is simply to grant planning permission subject to conditions without any financial contribution. So I say apologies if there was a little bit of confusion in the way that this report is read, but say just in terms of the scheme itself, the scheme hasn't changed. The scheme as submitted is identical. The only change has been the claim on viability. So as the report concludes, the recommendation is just to approve subject to permission without any financial contributions.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Stephen. Yeah. Right. We have Councillor Franks as local member who would like to speak at this point. I remind you, you have 3 minutes, Chris. If you'd like to come on.
Permission from the committee, Chair. Can you just, with permission from the committee?
Oh, yeah, with permission from the committee, I should say. Yeah, sorry. I'm assuming there's no dissent. Councillor Franks, are you there?
Yes, I am.
You have 3 minutes then from now.
Thank you very much. I don't blame the applicant objecting to the Section 106 initial proposal, but I do wonder if it's really worth us seeking to impose Section 106 on single properties. It seems to me that there's always issues involved. However, I've got to reflect the view of residents who in the immediate vicinity who will be disappointed by the planning recommendation, and they will want me to ask if the recent past is really a good indication of the final value of this property. We've had 2 years of very high interest rates, the chaos of the Truss government and her devastating impact on the community, and the near collapse of the housing market. So I just wonder how we can all be confident that this advice to have no Section 106 money is robust enough to support this new recommendation. Thank you very much, Chair and Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. Steve Butler, you want to comment on this?
Yeah, just on Councillor Franks' comments. In relation to, I'm also can't really comment in respect of claim about whether it's worth getting. We have secured a number of contributions for one single dwellings. In the main, though, since the introduction of the self-build exemption, we have a lot of developers or applicants have gone down that self-build exemption route. So to some extent, if the applicant were to just build out and develop and live in this property for 3 years effectively, he wouldn't be liable to pay that contribution in any case. Obviously valuations and build costs, etc., are very much based on the economic climate and obviously at the moment interest rates are rising, they might be dropping next year. I mean, to some degree, I think if you're in the middle of a significantly rising market, any viability can potentially correct itself. So just on some points made by some other councillors and the points made by some of the representations, where often on much larger schemes where viability is an issue, we do often ask for a viability review. That would be, for example, on a much larger schemes where you've got education contributions, and they're often on major residential schemes. But that wouldn't be, for example, that the developer has to pay us more money if, for example, they sell the house for more than they state they're going to be, the estimated value of it. The viability review is a two-way review, really, where they show that the final costs for development differ, and if they differ in a way that it's a positive figure, then a sum of money can be used to spend on planning contributions as we see fit. But that's, again, only much larger schemes. And of all the sort of single dwellings we get, we've never had any kind of clawback or overage clauses. We simply accept the position that is given. At officer level, really, it's quite unusual for something like this. It's only because the application came to committee, but normally it would be an officer decision to review the viability and to accept it. We do it quite a lot. I think a point worth mentioning is that obviously we're in a 40% affordable housing area in sort of Dinas Powys and Penarth, and sort of going back to the viability work that was done in support of the LDP. I think it was accepted, hence why there's that policy that not all areas within the 40% area will be viable. Some will be very viable, some will be less viable. So it's kind of not a one-size-fits-all, and that's why that policy is written in the supporting text to allow that flexibility for that to be challenged. But just like to say that they've put very detailed information in. Although it's could be argued, why on earth would they want to build out something where they lose money? In all honesty, maybe that this site is just sold off with a planning permission, and we may well get another application in a few years' time when things have kind of corrected, if you want to call it that. But sorry if I'm sort of going on a bit, but we're certainly satisfied that they followed the due process on this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any comments or queries from members of the committee now? Go with it. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. It appears to me that when it comes to Section 106, we tend to lose out on a number of schemes. Developers develop at their own risk. They then say they have a scheme that is not viable for them, and their costs have risen. Our costs are constantly rising as well, and surely it is part and parcel of this committee and this council to seek the best financial monies through 106, through planning gain that we can, especially if it's making up for the scheme in the first place. We've got a good record with 106. We made sure we employed the necessary skilled officer some years ago, and as a result, we've done well out of it. But we need to, because our resources are stretched, and for a private developer now to come back and say it's not going how I wanted, well, perhaps it's buyer beware, and you're a developer. Well, you must take some risk yourself. We didn't ask you to put this plan in, so it does concern me, and I feel that perhaps we need to be a bit more robust in how we defend 106 requests that we legitimately make and then get rebuffed some way down the line. So it concerns me, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'd like to echo what Councillor Hodges has said. We are in a situation where, as you know, funding is incredibly tight. We received a very difficult settlement this year in terms of the budget. And as you know, some of 106 funds housing, it funds infrastructure, it funds an awful lot of things that we do need 106 money for. And we've got to be fairly strong in terms of this. And I think, we've got to be careful about any precedent here. We've got to really, defend our position. And I'm thinking, I have sympathy with developers, but developers know their game. They know their sums, they know their maths, and they know what they can and can't do. So, I think we've just got to defend our position here.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Steve Butler.
Yeah, just to pick up on Councillor Hodges and Councillor Wilson's comment. I mean, we're not disagreeing with what you're saying at all, but the applicant has followed the due process, and he's followed the same process that big major house builders can follow in demonstrating viability. It'd be very difficult for us to turn around and say we don't agree with your figures when we do agree with the figures. So. We don't take these things lightly. Hence why there's quite a detailed section in this report. But all the figures stack up, and it would be very, very difficult to resist a viability claim based on the figures given by qualified chartered surveyors and valuers. So I mean, I understand that the kind of the buyer beware issue, but equally. It does work the other way. That if something is not viable, then it's not viable. In terms of the land value, the cost I believe was £80,000 for the chapel, which I would say probably not a significant amount of money, although that was obviously bought without any potential for residential redevelopment. But again, we are just satisfied that the figures do stack up. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Ian Robinson, you have your hand up as well.
Thanks, Jeff. So I put my hand up when Steve's audio was poor on mine, so I don't know if that was just mine or on everyone's. So he said much of it, but I just wanted to add as general commentary. The officers take no pleasure whatsoever in reporting things to planning committee with a viability case, and even more so when we've reported it previously with an agreement for one. It's incredibly frustrating, but we have to have regard to the evidence. I just wanted to give members comfort about how kind of rigorously we ensure these things are done. I mean, the application you're going to consider later on this evening, viability information was presented, and we didn't think it was strong enough, so we went back and said, no, you need to be more explicit about the viability case. We don't simply accept what's put in front of us. And you may remember in the case of Bolton House in Bombleston that we recommended refusal even though there was a viability case. So, there still needs to be a planning merit to it, and a reason for approving it, such as if there's a non-use on a site, a building that might fall into dereliction. Just general commentary, just to hopefully reassure members that it's not something that's simply taken off face value, and it's something that we really kind of try and work against where possible.
Thank you, Ian. I note that. Councillor Perry, you have your hand up.
Yeah, here I am. Hi, yeah, I'm just wondering, wasn't the S106 a factor in the decision that the planning committee made? On balance, if there's S106, that's taken into consideration in making the first decision. So equally, as people at Mark and Nick have said before, if you're taking away a community asset to replace with a house with S106 attached, then you may have changed that first decision if you'd known that in the first place. So I'm rather concerned again that S106, a few weeks or months down the line, suddenly makes the project unviable.
Thank you for your comment, Councillor Perry. Steve Butler, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, just picking up on Councillor Perry's point. I mean, that's the reason why we're reporting it back to committee, for that very reason, that the resolution was made subject to the contribution and how much that tipped members' view in balance of approving the scheme. So it's only right then that we report it back to see whether the members might then have a different view if Section 106 can't be paid.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Perry, can you put your request to speak hand down? Councillor Ernest.
Councillor Ernest, we can see you've activated your microphone. We can't hear or see you at the moment.
Can you see me now?
Yes, and hear you. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you. Chairman, I was just saying that I think this application had been to committee previously. It's coming back because of a number of queries that have been raised. The recommendation is for approval, and I get to move approval of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ernest. I'll second that if nobody else is putting their hand up. I, like many others on this committee, regret the viability arguments that we often see at this committee. However, I can see no way around it on this occasion. Unless I see dissent, yeah, I see dissent. In that case, we'll go to a vote. Amy will take us through the procedure.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair. We will run a vote as per the officer recommendations on page 67 and 68 of the report before committee. So the recommendations are for approval. So you will be voting for, against or abstain on those recommendations as per the report. Chair, would you like to bring in Stephen?
Stephen, you've got your hat before you.
Yeah, sorry, just to pick up what Amy said, just to avoid any confusion again. So we are voting on the recommendation, we're not voting on the recommendation in the report, which is incorrectly quoted.
Yeah,
the recommendation to grant planning
as amended.
Yeah, as amended, removing the text between the word recommendation and condition 1.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yes, I concur with that, Chairman. Thank you.
Just before we move to the vote again, Councillor Johnson, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, a question for Democratic Services, because we'll be voting previously under the old system, we would have been voting individually, so you'd be able to see the direction that people voted. We'll be having the vote displayed by individual councillor on the screen once it's been completed.
The vote will be as via majority, so there will be a yes or no chart. You can only have individuals voting on screen if you call for a recorded vote. So the standard electronic vote will show whether or not the recommendations are carried as per the report. If you wish to have individual names on screen, then we can do that via a recorded vote as per the Constitution, requiring 6 other members.
Sorry, can I just clarify? It requires 6 other members, irrespective of the size of committee, because that seems a bit strange in some of the smaller committees.
So as per the Council's Constitution, if you wish to call a recorded vote, you need 6 members to indicate that they wish to call a recorded vote. If I have that, I can then put the results on screen by individual. As standard for electronic voting, when you run the vote, as per the recommendations in the report, it will show you whether that is carried. So therefore, it is by majority, a bar chart, whether yes or no as carried.
Chair, if I may, I'd like to ask for a recorded vote, and I'm going to probably end up asking for recorded votes on almost everything this committee does, but that's up to the committee, obviously. Thank you, Chair.
We can go for a recorded vote. Just before we go to that, though, Councillor Perry, you have your hand up. Is that support for a recorded vote, or is that?
Yeah, I'll jump in before Nick and second that.
Right, okay. if members want a recorded vote, they need to put their request, if they tap their request to speak button, that will come up as support.
Just to say, Chair, I think it's a matter of transparency for the committee, given that we've traditionally, the traditional roll call vote has been able to see how people have voted so the public can see, rather than just, a simple majority, which I appreciate is, is something that gives the outcome but doesn't give the granular level of detail that I think people are used to seeing. Thank you, Chair.
In that case, we have sufficient numbers asking for a recorded vote. If we move to that then.
So if I may, Chair, because obviously we started the introduction on the vote there, so if I can just confirm my advice and finish with that. So we are going to go for a recorded vote. Obviously, as per the officer's recommendations on page 67 and 68, however, taking into account as amended the text that is to be removed between the heading recommendation and condition recommendation 1. We will go to a recorded vote shortly. For members of the committee who are at home, you will be voting for, against or abstain by the options that will come up on the right-hand side of your screen. For members that are in the chamber, you will be voting via the desk microphones with the plus, minus or abstain buttons that are in above your speak button. So that's your plus, minus and 0. Okay, so those will flash once the vote is started. So if you just bear with me one moment, Chair, we'll make sure that's working. When the vote is stopped, they will show as a majority in the first instance. It will then go to the recorded vote information as called for. Thank you.
It's functioning, it's not working.
I've got it. It's not started yet.
The vote hasn't started, Councillor.
Okay, it just says vote in progress at the bottom of our screen. That's the only
Yeah,
problem.
it will come to you shortly.
It's just being set up. So if you have patience, it should be there now. We have still one person who's not voted. That's it. We're all in. Thank you very much.
Okay, Chair, bear with us one moment. Stop the vote. Right, leave that for a second.
Right, you can see before you the list of, or it's just gone off, but that you can see that vote was carried by a narrow majority. Thank you all for bearing with us on that. We move on to agenda item 13, the second item, which is 2023/00087
Sorry, Chair, to interrupt. Would you mind going back to the enforcement item?
Oh, is Sandra back? Belay that. Sarah Feist, rather, is back with us, I think. So we can go back to the enforcement item. So we'll go back to the enforcement item. Why is my screen gone blank? Sarah, can we hear you? Nope.
Hello, Sarah. I believe you were going to come on Rob's device. Is that possible? If you could come off that on your screen and come on Rob's device, then we hopefully will be able to hear you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can hear you, Rob.
Okay, I'll pass on to Sarah now, okay?
Hi, Sarah. Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can.
We
Sorry about that, Chair.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, carry on.
Okay, thank you. So the first item is for members' information and to advise that it's been necessary for enforcement action to be authorised in relation to an urgent case, and that involves land at Hayes Road in Sully. So members may recall that in March last year, we issued a temporary stop notice in relation to an unauthorised ground engineering works being undertaken on the land. Following this, all works on the site ceased, but following receipt of further complaints in December last year, an investigation confirmed that the land was being cleared again. The surface of the ground was being reprofiled and in some places levelled, with a physical change in the appearance of the site. So officers considered that in the absence of a planning application, which demonstrated that these works would not have an adverse impact on biodiversity, archaeology and potential contamination, the works were unacceptable. It was therefore considered that enforcement action needed to be taken as a matter of urgency. Confirmation was provided by the Chair of Planning that delegated powers could be used, and a temporary stop notice and enforcement notice were issued on the 21st of December 2023.
Sarah, I'm very sorry to interrupt you. Is it possible to move your microphone away slightly, just because we're getting a lot of feedback from you?
Can you hear? Is that it?
Yes, that's much clearer. Thank you very much.
Move the microphone away. You mean? Yeah. Okay. So the temporary stop notice required the ground engineering operations to cease immediately, and the enforcement notice requires the works to cease permanently. So since notices were issued, a site meeting has been held with the owner of the land, and it was confirmed that no further works have been undertaken. So it's therefore recommended that members note the action that's been taken. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. I think we got the gist of that. It was breaking up quite badly, I'm afraid. I'm wondering if perhaps your headphone set isn't plugged in firmly.
Or then can they take the blur background?
And if you take the blurred background off, that might help as well. So any queries or any comments from members of the committee? Councillor Buckley, I think your name is first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chair. I had one question. On page 83, the last but one paragraph, it says, no, sorry, hang on, I'm on the wrong bit. No, on page 43, it says site one soil. Could you explain what that is, please?
It's basically soil that has been excavated on the site. So it's soil that's coming from that particular site, excavated.
It's just being moved on the site to there, is it?
Yeah, relocated within the site.
Thank you. I didn't understand that. Cheers.
Okay.
Are there any other queries or comments from members of the committee? In that case, enforcement action as per the report is recommended by officers. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder. Thank you. Councillor Hodges has moved.
Happy to second. Oh.
Yeah. Councillor Perks is seconding.
Happy to second.
Yeah. In that case, thank you on that one, Sarah. We have another.
So the second report, Chair, is seeks authorisation for an enforcement notice to be issued in respect of a new building, and that's been erected in a field located off Redway Road in Pendoylan. So the site is located to the east of Redway Road and is located in open countryside and also a special landscape area. So the site originally measured 8 hectares. However, following the investigation, the site has been extended to 17 hectares. The building is a rectangular wooden clad building with a flat roof and UPVC doors and windows on the front and side elevations. The building is approximately 16 metres long, 4.8 metres wide and 3.2 metres high, and it's located to the northern boundary of the site. So the current investigation into the activities carried out on the land has identified that the owner has a registered company, but he has not provided any financial records which demonstrates that an agricultural enterprise has been established. So although the landowner considers that the building benefits from permitted development rights and has increased the agricultural activities being carried out, it's not considered that this justifies a building of this size and design. Furthermore, since the preparation of the report, a further site inspection has confirmed that the new building is now being used to provide residential accommodation for the landowner and his family. The main issues for issuing the enforcement notice are set out in the report. At the time the building was erected, it was considered that its use was intended for residential leisure purposes or to provide a day shelter or mess room for agricultural workers. However, as the building is located on a site which is currently being used for very small agricultural activities, it's not considered that its retention is justified. The landowner has now started to use the building for residential purposes, and although he previously stated his intention to submit an application to retain the building as a temporary agricultural building, no planning application has been submitted. So in the absence of a suitable application, the retention of the building and its use for residential purposes is unacceptable, which is why enforcement action has been recommended. The building also appears to have been designed for residential occupation. The materials that have been used, particularly the UPVC windows and doors, result in a domestic appearance. The building is considered to urbanise the area to the detriment of the surroundings and the special landscape area. So the recommendation is therefore for enforcement action to be taken. And Chair, as it's been recently confirmed that the building is being used for residential purposes, we would ask members to agree an additional step be included with the enforcement notice. So the first step would be to cease the unauthorised residential use of the building, and then the steps set out in the notice would follow on from that. So the recommendation is for enforcement action to be taken. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. That was much clearer without the background on, so you'll be pleased to know. To confirm for the benefit of the minutes that Councillor Gilligan was admitted prior to the first enforcement item then, and has been in the room since. Do we have any comments from any councillors on this? I see no hands. In that case, the recommendation is enforcement action with the extra one about cease and desist, using it as a residential for residential purposes. Do we have any dissent on that? And is that seconded?
Happy to second.
Thank you for seconding. I see no dissent, therefore that is carried with no dissent.
Are you happy to move, Chair?
I moved it and Sandra seconded. And there's no dissent. Right, moving back on, we move back to 2023/0087 full Crossways Methodist Church, Court Road, Barry, and I think Rob, when he's in position. Rob, I think this is yours, please.
It is, yes. Hello. I'm going to try and share the slides, if that's all right. We prepared earlier. Don't know what I'm supposed to press.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, no problem, Rob. We can see your request come through. It's now waiting for source. So if you can select what it is you're hoping to share, please.
That one there. Okay, can you see that okay?
We're seeing a plan on screen.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so the proposals relate to the conversion and extension of the former Crossway Methodist Church at the corner of Court Road and Crossway Street to provide 15 one-bedroom affordable flats that will be delivered and managed by New Wave Housing Association. The site falls on the edge of Barry Town Centre and the street scene is largely residential in form, with terrace properties to the north, west and east, albeit with Holton Road Primary School to the south of the site, as can be seen on the following. Sorry, it's not clicking onto the next slide. There we are on the aerial photographs here. Car parking adjacent to the site is subject to a number of restrictions, including resident-only parking, as can be seen from the existing block plan here. The building largely fills the plot with the principal building on the corner of the road here, a lower hall building here, and a single-storey element to the rear there. The footprint of the building would remain commensurate with the existing within its plot, as shown on the floor plan here. The existing building is of a somewhat utilitarian design, reflective of its historic function, as can be seen from the photographs here. The proposals would include alterations such as an amended pattern of fenestration, introduction of some elements of cladding, and the extension of the building, including the raising of the eaves of the hall, as shown here, and perspective drawing shown here. Okay, so there's some elements of cladding here, alterations to the fenestration, and the eaves raising here. To the rear, the proposals will also include alteration and extension above the existing single-storey flat roof element here, with some fairly contemporary detailed extensions with high-level windows facing towards Holton Road Primary School adjacent to it. As also can be seen on the perspective drawings here, there would be bin and cycle storage areas demarked by these enclosures. So the first floor infill and rear extension is proposed to provide improved circulation space and additional accommodation within the building, as I've already alluded to, providing a total of 15 units within the building. Whilst the extensions to the southern side are contemporary in form and the raising of the eaves would elevate the whole element of the building, in visual and design terms, the proposals are considered appropriate additions that would add interest within a mixed street scene and would improve the existing functional appearance of the building. With regard to the principle of development, owing to the property's location within the Barry settlement boundary and the identified need for affordable housing, the proposals are considered to be acceptable. It is acknowledged that the historic use could be considered as a community use. However, owing to the marketing information provided by the applicant and a surplus of community space identified within the ward, as detailed within the background paper underpinning the LDP, owing to the significant weight that should be proportion to the need for affordable housing units, it's considered that it does not represent a reason to withhold planning permission in this instance. It is noted that the additional accommodation within the proposed extension would give rise to a slight intensification in the shortfall of the amenity space compared with a straightforward conversion, noting that obviously the extensions provide an enhanced level of accommodation compared to a straightforward conversion of the building. However, members are advised that in any event, the straight conversion of the building would provide no outdoor amenity space because of the constrained nature of the site, as the development already fills the plot. As clarified within the officer report, the applicant has indicated the extensions required to make the delivery of the scheme viable, including through the ability to gain access to additional funding through grant methods for modern methods of construction. Details provided by the applicant also demonstrate that a suitable net present value of development could only be achieved with a scheme of the quantum proposed. And as alluded to by Ian in the with reference to the previous scheme considered by members, this has been extensively considered by officers in consideration of the scheme in terms of the viability and weighing those things up. So on balance, it's considered the benefits of the scheme, namely the significant benefit of providing and addressing acute affordable housing need outweighs any shortfall in amenity space, particularly noting the units would not provide family-sized accommodation and the site is well located to allow access to existing areas of open space, including Central Park, which is within 200 metres of the site. One of the main kind of issues or concerns that was raised by residents was the lack of parking and issues relating to that as a result of the development. The proposals would benefit from no on-site parking, obviously noting the site constraints I've mentioned previously, or dedicated parking provision within the adopted highway. As detailed within the officer report, however, it's been established that residents of affordable housing schemes generally have lower levels of car ownership, and this is evidenced within previous schemes that have been before members of this committee. And whilst it almost must be noted that the site is positioned within an evidently sustainable location near to services within Barry Town Centre and Holton Road not being far away, so residents could realistically live without a car. Although potentially different in terms of times and characteristics of parking demand, the historic use of the building would also have had a significant parking demand at peak use periods, which is an evident fallback position and is also a material consideration when considering parking demand. Members are also advised, just on top of that, that during the course of the application, a parking survey was undertaken by the applicant, which demonstrated that 50 of the 157 spaces within the vicinity of the site, inclusive of 7 on Court Road, 7 on Crossway Street and 17 on Evelyn Street, were available at the time of the survey. It is acknowledged that this is only a snapshot in time. I think the survey was undertaken at 5:30 on a Wednesday morning in May. This demonstrates a degree of capacity within the local highway network when demand for parking to serve a residential use such as this would be its highest because the residents would be asleep in their properties. Furthermore, following the receipt of the parking survey and consideration of the proposals, the Council's Highway Development Section have advised they would be unable to sustain an objection on the basis of highway safety, noting the aforementioned considerations. To this end, the lack of dedicated parking to serve development is not considered to represent a reason to refuse planning permission in this instance. Overall, therefore, it is officer's recommendation that planning permission should be granted. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Rob. I believe we have a public speaker on this. Mr. Hurley, is it?
That's correct, Chair.
Can you come on screen?
He's connected, Chair.
Mr. Hurley, you are connected. Can you come on screen? You need to press the request to speak button at the centre. That's it. Can we hear you?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can now. You'll have 3 minutes when you start.
Thank you, Chair, and Mr. Lancashire for a good presentation. As you will be aware, this application has been recommended for approval by officers. It will deliver 15 affordable homes and is an opportunity to bring back into use this prominent building and go some way towards meeting, as quoted in the committee report, the acute housing need in Barry. The report confirms that currently on the council's Home for You waiting list are over 170 applicants in just the Buttrells ward for one-bedroom homes. On this basis, the proposal is the full support of the council's housing strategy team. The officer report confirms that in the Buttrells ward there is an excess use, a level of community space, and that the loss of the church is a result of the existing use not being viable anymore. The proposed development would involve some extension of the buildings, as we've heard, but is primarily a conversion. We've also submitted detailed viability information to the planning officers to show how the additional grant funding that can be secured by Newith against the extension element of the scheme, as it will deliver modern methods of construction, makes the scheme viable. On this basis, it is considered by officers that the proposal represents a sympathetic scheme which makes the most use of the existing building. It is also clearly pointed out within the report that there are no issues of residential amenity which would arise from the proposal. As we have heard in the officer's report, it's clearly stated that in terms of car parking, highway officers are in support of the proposal as the site is close to a variety of shops, services and facilities in the town centre. It is also important to note that the fallback position that has been referenced is a very relevant point to consider and is a material consideration in terms of car parking. As we have heard, we were asked to carry out a parking survey, and this showed that within the survey area, of a total of 157 spaces that were available on the road, 50 of these were unoccupied at that time. The proposed development of the site represents a great opportunity to provide new affordable housing, which is supported by a raft of planning policies at both the national and local level, and will secure and deliver much needed affordable housing. Thank you for your time, and we would respectfully request that the application is approved in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Mr. Hurley. If you just remain on screen for a few moments to see if there are any points of clarification that members of the committee would like to raise. Oh, it's Councillor Payne, you'd like to ask for a point of clarification?
Hiya, thank you. Just a point of clarification on the windows that are overlooking the junior school, Halton Road School. So are there a need for windows there at all? Can they be accommodated as roof? You know, you have like roof lights.
Helen, that's not a point of clarification, as Mr. Hurley didn't raise that, but you can ask that question within the debate.
All right, okay, fair enough.
So are there any other points of clarification? I see none. In that case, thank you, Mr. Hurley. We will move to the debate. Yeah. Helen, you can come back in now if you want and raise your point, and then we can...
Thank you.
Then Steve can address that.
Thank you, Chair, sorry. So my point is that are there any need for any windows on the side of overlooking the school? And is there another way to accommodate them within the plans as roof lights or other kind of a different way, really? And I also have another concern, which is about the amenity space. I am based in Halton Road in that area every day in my job. So I know that there is an issue of amenity space in terms of some of the temporary accommodation units there, and also in some of the new one-bedders that we've got in terms of leaving rubbish outside. So I know that that's a major issue in the area. So it's kind of 2 points, really.
Thank you, Helen. Ian, did you want to?
Yeah.
Okay, in that case, I'll ask Rob to comment, and then Ian, you can speak.
Okay. So I'll just reply to Councillor Payne's points, if I may. So the windows at first floor level fronting towards the school are high level and proposed to be high level windows with obscure glazing and fixed openings. So that would be offhand. I haven't got the ability to measure the plans quite instantaneously like this, but I believe that would be 1.7 meters above floor level. That's fairly standard height, which would essentially prevent any direct views out into the school playground. Obviously, the reason the windows are there is not necessarily to provide the primary outlook from rooms, because there are also windows within other elevations serving the building, particularly within the western elevations within those new build elements. But they would also provide, a better quality living accommodation for future occupiers in terms of the level of light that those rooms would serve. So we felt that the first floor windows and any overlooking would be overcome by those quite satisfactorily. And in terms of ground floor openings, any direct overlooking could be overcome by a suitable means of enclosure, separating the school from the church site. In terms of the amenity provision, as I mentioned within the present, yes, there is no amenity space in terms of garden area or anything like that serving these units, but kind of dedicated bin and cycle storage areas are proposed adjacent to Court Road to the west hand side. So officers of the case officer considered those and considered it was appropriate form. Also, that each if I recall correctly, each unit will have washing and drying facilities provided within the individual flats to serve those purposes. So that was why we considered that the amenity and bin storage areas were considered to be acceptable.
Okay, so the point is, can anybody see across? You're saying it's obscured and they're at ground level, so can you see through to the playground?
You shouldn't be able to know, because as I
Right.
said, the first floor windows are high, should be high enough above floor level that prevents any so they would be in essence above eye height. So you would have views up towards the sky, but not down towards the playground from first floor openings. And also the glazing would be obscured and thick shut, so you couldn't open them to peer out into the playground area. And that would
they couldn't go in the roof.
I mean, I think officers felt there wasn't a need for them to go into the roof because there was no direct views from that aspect. So in essence, whether they'd be in the roof or within that elevation, as suitably controlled, and I believe by condition, there would be no views possible from users of that, those properties into the school.
None at all.
One, because they'd be suitably above eye level, so 1.7 meters, which I appreciate I am not the tallest person in the world, but that would be about the top of my head. So it would not provide direct, views for people through them, and they'd be obscure glazed, so you like a normal bathroom window and fixed shut, so you wouldn't be able
It's
to
kind of about 6'6", 6'7", somewhere around there.
No, 6'6" is 2 meters.
Yeah, 2 meters. Yeah, well, it's not that high then.
This is 1.7, so it's probably just short of 6 foot.
Yeah, well, it's quite low, isn't it?
No.
All right, I think I made my point. Thanks.
Councillor Johnson, you're next in the queue.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'll wait for you to put on your headsets so that you're able to listen to the translation. And for the purposes of the people watching from home, those who are in the committee room are now putting on their headsets to listen to the translation through the headsets. Is everyone happy and ready to listen to the translation? Good thing. Thank you, Chair, for giving me permission to take part in this discussion. I shall be talking about the development on the previous site of the Methodist Church, in Crossway Methodist Church, as a local member. I called this application in for a decision by the full committee because of a substantial interest by local residents on the basis of 2 points. That is the change of use of the building and the rather intensive development on the site. In changing the use of the current building, this raises a number of questions, because could it be kept as is? Is there another community use that's possible? And if this is the only solution, could we retain the current building rather than demolishing and rebuilding? It was a surprise to me to see from reading the report that there had been an application to retain this building and keep its use as a church. And I noted that this was an application that was below the market price, but I heard at the end that the costs were higher. It is disappointing that this change of use application has been accepted when it could have been possible to keep the building in its original function and use, and that we should keep buildings for their original use as a church before changing that use. So that was my first point regarding the change of use of the building. I note the reference made in this presentation, and I'd like to refer in the papers to the Buttrell's Ward facilities. This is from a previous local development plan that dates back over 10 years, and it includes the Barry Memorial Hall, which is a huge building for the purposes of entertainment, and it's not really a comparison that's pertinent to this particular building. Turning this church into flats, we need to consider the intensity of the proposed application. 15 flats is on a piece of land that's 277 hectares, is rather a lot to ask. Only 7 of the flats reach the required standard in terms of space. The others are slightly below the required standard. The standards do have a purpose after all, and we shouldn't really accept applications that fall below that standard regarding space and floor space. And I'd note also the light that comes into 2 of the flats. To all intents and purposes, some of these flats do feel little like rabbit hutches and rather dark for people to live in. And we need to consider the quality of these flats rather than just providing somewhere for people to live. The developments have put in place a review to argue for continuing this application for 15 flats, but I would argue that this is too many flats for this site. Some of the residents have referred to the lack of parking spaces available for this development. It will have an impact on surrounding streets in the area, as noted in the previous minutes. This isn't enough to turn down the application, but I think it's worth noting this impact on the wider area. We had a discussion about on a bridge rather than social housing. We built a school instead of housing previously. The council does give priority to social housing, apart from when there are other priorities. Chair, if there were other facts on this site, but I can only audio settings tab on the left-hand side. If you select that, there's 2 options, floor and English. You want to select the English in order to hear our translators coming through. I just wanted to take the opportunity just in case there was more than that person who was doing that. Terribly sorry to interrupt. We can continue now, Chair, if that's okay. In terms of process, if people haven't actually heard my submission and my argument, how are they able to make a decision to vote? Are we clear that everyone has had the same experience? Do we know whether everyone's heard? Looking back at my notes, just to confirm where I was about to summarize to complete my submission. Chair, some things happening in the room. So, Chair, if there were fewer flats, I might feel better about this application. but I can only vote on the application that's before me this evening. And despite the consultation and discussion, no change has been made to improve this application. So I unfortunately will be voting against, and I would like the vote to be recorded, please, as previously. I would also like to note my support to retain the use of the church or to give it a social purpose for this building, and that I'd like to continue the discussion around keeping this building for the community in some form. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson. Take that off. Councillor Ernest, you would like to comment?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm afraid I heard very little of what Councillor Johnson had to say, but I'm sure it was very valid. This application reminds me very much of the St Paul's Church in North Penarth, which was converted, more or less derelict church, converted into housing association and flats, built at the back of the building, and they, like in this particular application, have no outlook, no amenity space, no parking. I don't think they've even got cycle spaces. But that's probably many of the people living there are, should we say, of middle to older age groups. I don't think bicycles are an awful lot of use to them, which brings me to this application we're talking about, because I'm looking particularly at the paragraph on page 114, halfway down the page, policy MD2. Now, that's the design of new development and setting out key principles which developers should consider in terms of design, amenity, and access, which together contribute to attractive, safe, and accessible environments. And we hear the officer say that the outlook, yes, they'll be able to look over the bin store, they'll be able to look over the cycle storage area, which is a new one. As for any space to walk out or get a breath of fresh air, it doesn't exist in this application. Simply doesn't exist. We're looking at 15 mini boxes on the chapel site, which is overcome by raising the level of, I think it was the church hall, and cutting down on space within the development. I'm sorry, Chairman, but this is, whilst it's a very worthy application in terms of providing homes for people, I'm very interested to hear one of the local members at least expressing doubt in her mind, and I fully support her doubt and will be voting against the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ernest. We've got a number of people wishing to speak, so I'll propose we go through that, and then I'll ask Rob to comment on the various points raised. Next on my list is Councillor Buckley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Ernest and Councillor Johnson, the lack of amenity space when I initially looked at it was quite concerning to me. However, 200 metres from Central Park, I can see where the developer is saying that there is open space which people can use, and even in the depths of COVID, you were allowed to go 5 minutes from your house, so that they would have had access to that. 50 parking spaces available at 5:30 in the morning on a Wednesday, I think is pretty accurate as you're going to get it for residential parking. And even so, our need in that area is for single bedroom dwellings rather than single parking spaces. 15 does seem to be a lot in the development. However, I can see the need for the single bedroom apartments. With regards to the windows overlooking the school, the houses around there and the houses around all the schools that overlook the playgrounds are only used 45 to 60 minutes a day, and I don't believe all the windows on the houses around schools are obscured. You do need light getting into the rooms. You do need natural daylight rather than artificial light getting in. And although it does look like overcrowding, I do applaud the fact that they're trying to put 15 dwellings that we so sorely need.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Wilson, you have your hand up.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just making a few observations coming from a city centre location where I came from in central London. I'm fully aware of amenity space or a lack of it, and obviously, there are compensations. As Councillor Buckley rightly says, we're not far away from Central Park here. We're not far from King Square. We're not far from public transport accessibility on King Square, which is really good. And really, you're not far away from a main shopping area as well. So really, you're on a central place. People can get out and about and walk around. And as Councillor Buckley rightly says, we've got huge issues with the lack of housing. I get almost daily emails from residents looking for more accommodation or better accommodation, or even accommodation per se. And I think this fulfills it. And also, as we rightly said about viability, housing associations have got to make things stack up as well. And viability, is maximising space in a way that's appropriate. And I consider this location to be an appropriate location, given the housing need, given the fact that we're in an area where there's lots of amenities going on, socially, parks, open space, shopping areas. I fully support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Perry, I apologise, I skipped you. Can you come in now?
Yeah, you cut me off very, very short. That was just thank you, Councillor Perry. Move on.
Yeah, no, sorry. That was my own handwriting. Actually, it's my fault. I apologise.
Yeah, I've been cut short before, but that was the shortest ever. Just a few notes on this system. When Ian Johnson was the first Ian to speak on this, was speaking, and then Amy came in, all we got was silence, and so we had to go to our settings and change back to the floor. And then we heard the end of Amy, who then finished, and it went back to Ian, and then we had to go to change our settings. But at least this is my case, by the time I changed my settings, I'd missed part of the translation because there was a time lag. So perhaps if we're changing from English to Welsh, we could have a little bit of a pause in future, just so that we can get to our settings and change and know what's going on. And if the Welsh translation can actually say that we're going to be handing over back to the floor, just so that we don't miss anything. A few comments. Additionally, this development has no space for mobility scooters. It has space in the 15 dwellings for 3 bicycles, but it's vertical storage. So if you're not aware of what that is and entails, it means lifting your bicycle. So if you have a heavier bicycle or a bicycle with a basket, a cargo bicycle, it's not appropriate. So you've got to park your bicycle out on the street or somehow get it through the corridors into these flats that are, relatively small, as we've all heard. So when the developer is saying there's bicycle storage there, it's bicycle storage for a young, physically fit person, probably in their 20s or early 30s, with a very expensive light bicycle that is probably not best for taking shopping to and from your home. So I think it really needs to sort of clamp down on how we define bicycle parking, because you can say there's a lamppost outside, there's bicycle parking. Yeah, you can just clamp it to the lamppost and block the footway. So there's a lot of flaws here. Again, it's a shame we can't have shared services. Why does every flat, there's 15 washing machines in this property. Why do we need 15 washing machines for perhaps 15 people? Why can't we have 2 or 3 communal washing machines with a washer dryer of higher spec in the shared area, if we're going to talk about sustainability? So yeah, this is housing for other people. We don't really, it ticks the box. We don't really care about them because it's not us living there. It's 15 dwellings. Great, we all get paid, everyone lives happily ever after, and we put people in here, and the physically fit can fight over the 3 parking spaces. So it's not a good development. I would never put my name to this. So on that basis, on balance, I'm leaning against officer recommendations for approval. It's just not something that I would want other people to live in.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. I'd take your point on pausing before the translation, and we'll endeavour to remember in future, or at least I'll ask Amy to remember for me. Councillor Bruce, you wanted to speak?
Yes. Is there any possibility of reducing the number of flats from 15, say, down to 12, just to give some more space inside? And the fact that you say that people can use Central Park, but if it's pouring with rain, you're not going to go down to Central Park just for a breath of fresh air. Just my thoughts.
Councillor Bruce, for the benefit of yourself and some of the other newer members of the committee, we have to deal with the application as it is before us. It's not for us to make amendments or anything to the application. Are there any other people who want to speak? Eddie Williams. Yeah, Councillor Hodges first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've had a church or two reconfigured in my area for housing, and good jobs have been made of that. The difference being, of course, that they were privately done, so they were done with a sense of scale, size, availability, and reasonable expense not spared sort of thing. So a good job was made, and they didn't get much opposition from me. I sought to slightly amend the plans, which I managed to do, and I was very happy with the end result. This is a housing association application, and to me, I have to put my Vale Glamorgan hat on and think, if this was a Vale Glamorgan scheme, would I be happy with it? And the answer is no. It's already been pointed out the number of the units are below an acceptable size. I think this is a bit of a tick box exercise. It's like cycle store, tick, bin store, tick. But where's the consideration of the residents that would have to live in small units with no amenity space? And we're talking about obscured glass windows at head height in some cases. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound healthy. I think this could be a good scheme if they simply did reduce the numbers. And as been said to Councillor Bruce, we have to vote on what's on in front of us, which is why I can't support it. And if we actually reject this, perhaps the developers will come back with a scheme that does suit our needs, requirements and hopes. So I will be voting against, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. Councillor Williams, you want to speak?
Thank you. I think we've had enough discussion on it now, so I'm happy to move officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. Councillor Perks, you'd like to make a comment?
I suppose what I would like to make a comment about is that, as we know, that these houses will have to be built to Welsh quality standards, and that would go for space as well within these properties. So that would be, you know, the living conditions that people will have in a one-bedroom flat, that their actual space within that flat has to reach a certain standard that Welsh Government have set down. You know, and I sort of agree with that. There needs to be the frosted glass overlooking the school. There needs to be that there. And I think, you know, if we look at other properties within inner city Barry, then you know, there isn't that much an amenity space in these places either. And I think, you know, these flats sort of have all the local amenities, the shops, the buses, the sort of the other facilities that are available there as well. So that's just what I wanted to say. Thank you. Yes, I can second.
Right. It's been moved and seconded. Yes.
Sorry, Chair. Just for clarification, I wonder if I have clarification from the officer, because I mean, Councillor Perks just made a point that it has to be of a certain size. But page 113 seems to suggest that only 7 of the flats meet the 50 metres squared requirement out of the 15. So I'm just looking for clarification as to whether that's meeting our requirements or Welsh development quality requirements, because it appears to suggest that they don't. Thank you.
I'll ask for Rob to comment on all the points raised now. And then I will I'll ask for the, it's been moved and seconded, the officer's recommendations are moved and seconded. I'll take a show of hands for your moving for a recorded vote, and then we'll move to the vote. Oops, I just knocked myself off. So Rob, if you'd like to come on and comment on the comments that you've heard, please.
Okay, I mean, I guess firstly, in terms of the quantum development, the number of flats there, I know a number of councillors have mentioned the number of units within the proposals and potentially looking at reducing that number. You know, this is something that officers did explore during deliberation of the application and queried whether a reduced scheme would be better. But as I alluded to within my kind of presentation at the start, it was made apparent that the viability of the scheme and access to, you know, grant funding for modern methods of construction and things were required to achieve the net present value to allow the housing association to take the scheme forward. So that was why and how we've arrived at the 15 units. In terms of Councillor Johnson's points, you know, the report is self-explanatory in that some of the units do have a modest shortfall compared to the WQR standards, and that you know, I'm not going to gloss over the fact that that's you know a couple of square meters deficit in some instances. And also, just in terms of the obscure glazing, I appreciate some reluctance on behalf of kind of having habitable room windows with just obscure glazing is not something that and not something that is encouraged. And you know, the vast majority of the rooms within this development, as detailed within the report, have that do have obscure glazed high level windows also have alternative outlooks from them. So it's not the case that they are particularly the ones fronting the school. I think the ones on the eastern side of development, which are wholly obscured, are significantly larger openings that do provide a significant level of light, which and a degree of outlook through a high level opening as well. So these things were all carefully considered by officers, and just like to assure members that all these things have to be considered again in the balance of an acute identified need for affordable housing within the Buttrells ward, which I think the report highlights a number of 170, but in actual fact, I checked with our housing strategy colleagues today, and they've indicated there's a need for 403 units within the Buttrells ward, with some up-to-date figures. So just so members are aware of that, and obviously can consider all those things in the round. So thanks, Chair, for that opportunity to clarify.
Thank you, Rob. Right. Unless there's anybody else. Nobody. No. In that case, nobody else indicate we need to consider Councillor Johnson's request for a recorded vote. You can do this by clicking on the show of by a show of hands, clicking on the request to speak button on your if you're remote. I've got 2 in.
You've got 4, you've got 5. One more show of hands. I've got them 2.
That's it.
You've got Councillor Perry, Johnson, Hodges, Wilson and Buckley. So you have 5. You need 1 more.
I have 5. In that case, I'll support it as well. So we will have a recorded vote. If Amy, you can set that up, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. If you bear with us one moment, please, we will start the vote shortly. Okay, committee, the voting has now begun for you. If you could please vote. You are voting as per the officer recommendations set out in the report starting at page 121. So you can vote for, against or abstain, please. For members of the committee at home, the voting option should appear on the left-hand side of your screen. Sorry, the right-hand side of your screen. Thank you, Chair.
So all 15 have voted. We'll stop the vote now. There's the list of the way people have voted. That's clearly carried. Yeah, thank you all. That brings us to... Yeah, we've done that. Sorted that. It's been pulled. Agenda item 14, I don't have any items that I've decided are urgent. Nobody's brought anything. There's nothing under part 2. The next meeting is on, I've got written it down somewhere, the 22nd of February 2024. Thank you all for your attendance. Thank you for your patience with the teething troubles with the system. We all suffered them. And have a good evening. Thank you.